Honorable members, the prayer. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our King and to his government, to members of the Legislative Assembly and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interest and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Amen. Honorable members, it being the last sitting day of the week, we will now be led in the singing of God Save the King by Mr. Matthew Bissett. Please be seated.
Introduction of visitors.
Honorable members, it's my pleasure to introduce to you a visitor to the Assembly today. Joining us, the former member of the Assembly for Edmonton, Beverly, Clairview, the Honorable Darren Billis, who served this place from 2012 to 2023. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
didn't realize the former minister brought his whole family here.
I do have a number of guests, so my apologies to my colleagues who are waiting, but it is a great pleasure of mine to introduce to the Assembly the Honourable the Minister of Finance's family to the Chamber today. All members of the Assembly know the great price that our families pay for our public service, and so it's my pleasure to welcome to the Assembly the Minister's spouse, Jennifer Horner, and daughter Avery, his parents, Brett and Kate Horner, his sister, Brett Richards, and nephew Ransom. Lastly, we have his sister Lindsay Douglas and his niece Darcy. I invite you to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. Lastly, members, I do have a number of other guests who are joining us for the budget today, seated in the Speaker's Gallery. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the Reeve of Kneehill County, Mr. Ken King, who's joined by his wife, Ruth. We also have the former Reeve of Mountain View County, Mr. Al Kemery, who is the current chair of the Olds College Board of Governors. We have Jeff Kasbrick, the Vice President of Advocacy and Operations for the Alberta Motor Association. Also seated in the Speaker's Gallery is Mr. Craig Lowen and Brett Esslinger, the pastor of Saints Church here in Edmonton. And while it might be budget day for most of Alberta, today is actually family day in the Speaker's office, and I'd like to introduce to you Julia Koning, who is spending her PD day here with her father, Mr. Andrew Koning, who is an important member of my team. Before anyone starts to feel too bad for Julia, it was actually her choice to come to the Assembly today. And lastly, a fairly familiar face to the Assembly is my father, who's been spending a few days with his favorite child, helping me do some hosting. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. The honourable member, and just for members' sake, the clock for introduction begins now. The Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, the Deputy Premier, has an introduction.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce to you and through you and to all members of the Assembly the amazing kids from Menno Simmons Christian School and their teacher, Aaron Folkerts from Calgary West. I want to thank them for making the trip today from Calgary to be here with us today. So please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. Thank you.
Member for St. Albert. Does the honourable member for St. Albert have an introduction? No. The honourable member for Calgary, or Airdrie East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two introductions today. It's a pleasure to introduce to you and through you and to members of this Assembly. Two great constituents of mine, Roger and Wendy Weinstein. They're here. Weinstein, my apologies. They're here to see the reading of the budget today. And also, I do have a favorite guest, my daughter, Molly Pitt, who is here. She made provincials for swimming this weekend and is in Edmonton, and so she's here visiting us. I'm so proud of her and her accomplishments. Would you all please rise and receive the traditional warm welcome?
The honourable member for Grand Prairie. The honourable member for Calgary East has an introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the chamber to introduce to you and through you one of my good friends, Dhruv Sharma. He's a strong advocate and dedicated volunteer for Calgary, and it is my sincere honor to introduce to you today. I ask that he now rises and receives the traditional warm welcome of this Assembly.
The member for Calgary Klein. Calgary Klein, no. The member for Sherwood Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce to you and through you to all the members of the Assembly, although I'm not sure they've made it through security yet, Eric Lowe, President-elect of the International Association of Firefighters, local to Sherwood Park, local 2461, and Elliot Davis, now Secretary-Treasurer of the Alberta Professional Firefighters and Paramedics Associations. Eric and Elliot, if you are here, I ask you to rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly.
The member for St. Albert.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I do have a group from Sturgeon Heights School, grade 6, and I will have them all stand up and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. Thank you.
The member for Chestermere Strathmore. Member for Chestermere Strathmore.
Thank
Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to introduce both to you and through you Bruce Kleiber of the Legacy Farm Project in Strathmore, a monument to our provincial history, and his granddaughter, Clara Langan, an incredible young woman and member of the Minister of Education's Youth Council. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
The Minister of Indigenous Relations.
Through you, Jennifer Gary's Executive Director of the Leduc and Nisku-Wetaskiwin Regional Chamber of Commerce, and the President, Tanis Cheshire. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a great honor to rise and introduce to you and through you my loving mother, Donna Wright, who has joined us all the way from Medicine Hat here today. Please rise and receive the greeting and welcome of this House.
Here, here. The Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, today to you and through you, it is my pleasure to introduce to the Assembly Rishi Nagar, Jay Chowdhury, and Dharampreet Dillon from Red FM Calgary. This group is part of Canada's largest South Asian media network, bringing dedication, insight, and vibrant multicultural voice to Calgary. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Are there others? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Glenora.
Eva and Brandon Rye, they are two amazing student and parent advocates, mental health advocates, and trans rights advocates. Please rise and receive the welcome of our Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Beverly Clairview.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to introduce to you and through you Foster, who's the Director of the Parkland Institute of Alberta, as well as Bradley the Fortune, the Executive Director of Public Interest Alberta. So glad that they're both here today.
Government Whip.
And to you and the members of the Assembly, the outstanding Mayor of Parkland County, Alan Gamble, has now made our attention. He is an amazing advocate for the area, did a lot of work with the firefighting last year, and an absolute honor and privilege to work with this man. Please receive the warm welcome of the Assembly, sir.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Northwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Marnie Panas, who's my good friend and a constituent of Edmonton Northwest.
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Calgary, Boular McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce to you and through you to the all members of this House three guests from Calgary: Mohammed Rashid Khan, Tahir Aziz, Syed Sadaq Hussain. They are all from my home district of Poonch, Jammu Kashmir. Rashid Khan is president for UK PNP for North America chapter. I asked them to rise and receive the warm welcome of this.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton West Henday.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honor to rise today to introduce to you and through you a few folks. I have Sophia Marie Martel, President of the Indigenous Students Union, Sarah Dahl and Holly Nickel, constituents of Edmonton West Henday, Dr. Christopher Wells with McEwen Pride Center, Cheyenne McHugh from Edmonton Two Spirit Society. Please rise to receive the traditional.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Lougheed.
I'd like to introduce my good friend from Calgary, Mr. Roy Byer, Calgary Lougheed CA President Daryl Comic, Calgary Acadia President Lindsay Davis, and economist Tanner Day. Please rise for me.
Just a sec, Shannon. Honourable members, that concludes the time allotted for introductions, but with apologies, I do know that the Honourable former Minister of the Assembly, Rick Fraser, is here today. If you would like to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly as well. Go ahead, Shannon.
Ministerial statements. Member statements.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Decor has a statement to make.
Mr. Speaker, February is a month that serves as a reminder of the enduring legacy and immeasurable contributions of Black Albertans. From the untold stories of resilience to the remarkable achievements that shape the tapestry of this wonderful province, we bear witness to the remarkable growth of the Black community, emerging as one of the fastest growing communities in our province. This promising presence not only enriches the cultural mosaic of our province, but also underscores the indispensable contributions to our economy, our growth, and our social cohesion. While Black Albertans honors this month for a very long time, it took 22 years for our province to officially recognize Black History Month. Throughout the month, alongside with many elected officials, I joined community leaders, scholars, entrepreneurs, highlighting contributions and successes while recognizing the challenges and opportunities ahead. Whether it is the school gyms in Amilazert High School in my constituency or alongside City Councilor in St. Albert or next to the Mayor of Beaumont making First Black History Month proclamation or next to the high school students and teachers in Sherwood-Back or beside University of Alberta scholars or listening to Calgary's community leaders. This has been a month of celebrations, conversations, and commitments to change. Mr. Speaker, throughout the month, I consistently heard that despite significant progress towards equality, systemic disparities continue to disproportionately impact Black Albertans. As we come to the end of this month, Mr. Speaker, I call members of this House to fully commit to building a province where diversity is really celebrated, where justice is upheld, and where every individual, irrespective of race, gender, or any other background, is empowered.
The Honourable Member for Leduc-Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the Alberta Utilities Commission's brief pause on renewable energy project approvals comes to an end. 7 months ago, the pause was implemented for one simple reason. We need to ensure our electricity grid is reliable, affordable, and developed responsibly for years to come. Albertans were issued a stark reminder on the importance of grid reliability in January, where the province narrowly avoided rolling blackouts in -40-degree weather. Our government listened to Albertans' concerns and has set a clear and responsible path forward for renewable project development. With these new changes, Alberta will continue to attract new investment in the renewable sector while protecting the environment, agriculture, and Albertans' property rights. Like the Premier said, we have a duty to protect the natural beauty of our province. You cannot build wind turbines the size of the Calgary Tower in front of a UNESCO World Heritage Site or in front of our many historic landmarks or in your neighbour's backyard. The members opposite would have you think this pause caused investment uncertainty, but the numbers tell a different story. Last year, more than 92% of Canada's overall growth in renewable energy and energy storage capacity happened right here in Alberta. The number of new renewable project proposals seeking approval doubled throughout the pause, and they will continue to grow thanks to our unique deregulated electricity market, our competitive tax system, and our government's commitment to reducing economic barriers. Alberta's energy economy is the envy of the world, anchored, of course, by the world's third-largest proven oil reserve and an abundant and safe supply of natural gas. This baseline of energy production will allow us to continue to integrate renewable energy projects into our electricity grid, and the new guidelines announced today will ensure that this is done in a responsible and prosperous manner. Thank you.
Well done.
Honourable Member, as is required, I believe a translation has been provided for the upcoming member statement. The Honourable Member for Edmonton South West.
Mr. Speaker, throughout February, thousands of Albertans across this province celebrated Lunar New Year. From delicious banquets, boisterous street festivals, colorful cultural performances, and community gatherings, it is one of the most celebrated traditions around the world, marking the first new moon of the lunar calendar and the beginning of spring. However it is celebrated, the themes of Lunar New Year are truly universal. It is a time for family, community, togetherness, and renewal. In so many of the celebrations I, along with my colleagues, attended this year, I was reminded of the hardworking and resilient folks in the Chinese community who work so diligently to preserve the vibrancy of our Chinatowns. From traditional clan and fraternal organizations to the local business and community associations, I've been reflecting on the trailblazers and generations of Albertans who helped build this province. Chinatown has been hit especially hard in the last few years with the impact of the pandemic and the rise of a new wave of anti-Asian discrimination. But despite the monumental challenges, inspiring folks from community leaders, volunteers, shopkeepers, and young people have persistently and tirelessly dedicated their time and efforts to making Chinatown a more vibrant and inclusive place, not only for the Chinese community, but for all Albertans. I am proud to work with and support these amazing changemakers as they work to revitalize such an important part of Edmonton and Alberta. I would like to invite all of my colleagues in the legislature to join me in wishing those in the Chinese community and beyond a very prosperous year of the Dragon. 祝大家新春大吉，财源广进，龙凤呈祥，幸福安康。
The honourable member for Chestermere Strathmore has a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am proud to stand and recognize International Women's Day, which will be celebrated around the world on March 8th. Mr. Speaker, through my volunteer work both here in Alberta and abroad in countries like Tanzania and Bolivia, I've witnessed the strength and the fortitude of women. Women are not just passive bystanders, but leaders in their families and communities. And women deserve to be celebrated, regardless of how they choose to exercise their agency, not erased and referred to as folks with uteruses, as our friend across the aisle has often said in this chamber. Alberta has a long and a proud history of women leaders, from Louise McKinney, the first woman elected in the entire British Commonwealth, to Violet King Henry, the first black women lawyer in Canadian history. We've had 3 women premiers, more than any other province, and women have served and continue to serve as heads of some of our largest and most important companies. But women also serve quietly and privately, and in ways that are just as important as lawyers, a premier, or a CEO. Thank all the unsung women of our communities. Thank you to the mothers who have chosen to stay at home and raise the next generation of Albertans and Canadians. Thank you to the teachers, including those who homeschool, who have invested countless hours to ensure those same Alberta kids are growing up to be good people and good citizens. Thank you to the matriarchs who provide critical love and guidance every single day. Thank you to the caregivers who have selflessly dedicated their lives to being there for others in their times of need. Thank you to the workers who are breaking down barriers in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, film, television, music, energy, agriculture, trucking, the trades, and even politics. Women are playing a critical role in shaping the next chapter of Alberta's story and on international. Thank them for everything they do.
Hear, hear. For Calgary Foothill.
Mr. Speaker, with each passing day, Albertans are left wondering if their government is working for them or against them, whether they are committed to getting the best for Alberta or simply rejecting Ottawa just for the sake of it. This began with the Alberta Sovereignty Act, and yes, I omitted the United in a United Canada because, quite frankly, many Albertans are wondering if this government is interested in a United Canada. This act does nothing more than create regulatory and judicial uncertainty for investors and Albertans. This continued with this government's pursuit of the Alberta Pension Plan. Against the desires of the majority of Albertans, this government has chosen to put the secure pensions of Albertans and all Canadians at risk. Despite the fact the CPP is stable and reliable, with each pensioner receiving benefits based on their own contributions. We've seen it in the delivery of childcare services, with Alberta being one of the last provinces to come to an agreement with Ottawa. Since then, this government has been failing service providers and parents and are still not close to a $10 a day daycare goal. Instead, the UCP blames Ottawa for the results, while other provinces get on with the business of delivering much-needed services to their citizens. And now we see it with pharmacare. The federal government has proposed a system that would provide contraception and essential medications for diabetes to all Albertans. Alberta has chosen to reject this proposal without any negotiation on how it could benefit Albertans. This government does what it always does, simply reject something outright because they don't like the person who put the idea forward. Mr. Speaker, it is time for this government to stop their petty disputes with Ottawa and get on with the business of governing and making life better for Albertans. There is an offer on the table to make lives more affordable and relieve anxiety for so many. Act like a reasonable government. Sit down, figure it out, and deserve.
I'm sure members will be aware of the long-standing tradition of member statements being allowed to be uninterrupted under any of the circumstances. And honourable members, that brings us to 150, which makes it oral question period. And the honourable member for Edmonton Millwoods and the official opposition House Leader has question 1.
Mr. Speaker, during last spring's election, this Premier promised Albertans a tax cut that was supposed to start on January 1 of this year. The have broken this promise. In the speech from the throne last fall, her government again promised, quote, Alberta's government will lower the tax burden for Albertans, saving Alberta taxpayers up to $750 annually. To the Premier, that tax cut was supposed to come 2 months ago, so why promise it twice if you were never going to deliver it on time?
The Honourable the Premier has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The #1 commitment we made to Albertans would be that we would run a balanced budget. And when the budget is revealed a little bit later today, the member opposite will understand why we want to take an extra year to have a little bit of caution, a little bit of prudence. Not that we saw any of that when they had the opportunity to issue budgets where they ran an $80 billion debt, introduced a carbon tax which they didn't campaign on, introduced personal income tax increases, introduced a business tax that drove business out.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Nothing has materially changed since she made that promise, and nothing the Premier says can be trusted. Immediately breaking election commitments is cynical politics. In the throne speech, the Premier also promised, quote, Albertans new and old need to be able to rent apartments and homes for their families without compromising their food budget. Since then, Calgary has dropped to the second highest rent increases in the country, but only because Edmonton is now first. Great work, Premier. So now why have you broken this promise and done nothing to help Albertans facing higher rents?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I guess the thing that has changed is that we continue to have an inflation crisis caused by the Liberal NDP coalition in Ottawa and their reckless spending, and the fact that they have a carbon tax, which incidentally, it sounds like the members opposite.
The Honourable the Premier has the call.
Sounds like the members opposite are having a change of heart about the carbon tax at the federal level. Maybe they don't want to listen to their federal boss any longer. But that's the point, Mr. Speaker, is we have to make sure that we have a reasonable increase in year-over-year spending to keep up with that.
The Official Opposition House Leader.
More words, Mr. Speaker, without any action. Let me try another one. In the throne speech, the government promised to, quote, significantly improve and grow the capacity of our healthcare system for all Albertans. Mr.
Teachers have known all along that despite Alberta having some of the biggest increases in enrollment, the UCP are responsible for a decline in per-student spending. Funding per student in our so-called Alberta Advantage was 13% lower than the national average. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that has demonstrated time and time again that they think so very little of public education. To the Minister, in the mandate letter from the Premier were the orders to continue underfunding Alberta
The
students.
Honourable the Minister of Education.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the statement is just full of rubbish. Our government firmly believes in supporting education across the province, in supporting public education and alternative education programs. We believe that parents need the ability to decide which educational vehicle is the most appropriate for their families. In the last budget, we provided $820 million over the next 3 years to help deal with enrollment pressure. That funding will be directed to hire more teachers, and of course, we want to see Alberta continue to grow and succeed, and will continue to provide support in that regard.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Beddington.
Thank you. This government's policy of chronically underfunding Alberta students and undermining their education and futures simply can't be allowed to continue. Does the minister agree that an honest recognition of this injustice and an immediate increase in per-student funding is needed just to bring us up to the national average? We should be one of the best jurisdictions in the country for students to learn and thrive. So will the minister advocate on behalf of students and get the government to at least bridge the gap?
That's funny. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, yes, our government will always advocate for students to ensure that we have a world-class education system. As we already do, Mr. Speaker, we do indeed have a world-class education system, and will continue to ensure that's the case. The members opposite, of course, don't have experience in this regard, because when they were in power, they drove everybody out of the province, enrollment declined, people left, investment left, and the members opposite didn't have these challenges to work with. Mr. Speaker, we are committed committed to ensuring that all students receive a world-class education.
The order, the honourable member.
So the UCP love to brag about the support they give to Alberta students and teachers, and now we know just how inadequate that has been. We need real investments to make sure that Alberta students are the best, not worst, funded in Canada, which will ensure that future generations are able to succeed. Can the minister assure this House that today's budget does this? Or will students have to wait another 4 years for a government that is interested in supporting them?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to all students, parents and families, our government is absolutely committed to ensuring that all students will continue to receive a world-class education. We will do that by ensuring, as is evident in Budget 23, providing additional funding to support enrollment growth and challenges, by hiring additional teachers, by addressing classroom complexity to ensure that our schools have speech-language pathologists, psychologists, and other professionals to address the complex needs of our students. That is our commitment, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to deliver on that objective.
The honourable member for Calgary Varsity has a question.
Albertans will not get access to quality health care without adequate treatment space. Yet, unbelievably, despite knowing that construction takes years and that Alberta's population is booming, development of the South Edmonton Hospital has been suspended. Building a standalone children's hospital is needed, but the celebration is tainted by cancelling the South Edmonton Hospital. Can the minister assure Albertans that, unlike her promises on the South Edmonton Hospital, she won't break her promise to build the Stollery?
The Honourable the Minister of Health has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't the minister when the South Edmonton Hospital was discussed, but I am now, and I'm committed to getting Edmontonians and all Albertans the right care in the right place at the right time. Mr. Speaker, the Stollery Hospital is much needed. It's been much needed for a very, very long time, and we are committed to seeing it through. Mr. Speaker, I was happy to announce that we are moving that project forward. Mr. Speaker, all children in Northern Alberta will be happy to hear this, as are their families.
Order, the Honourable Member for Calgary Varsity.
It was just over a year ago that the Premier declared that there is no crisis in the healthcare system. Since then, we've seen that not only is the crisis real, but under the watch of this health minister, it is getting much worse. ERs were closed for more than 38,000 hours last year, and 60% of family doctors are considering leaving Alberta, even though 800,000 Albertans already don't have access to a family doctor. Will the health minister acknowledge that despite the Premier's claims, there actually is a crisis in healthcare?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, this is absolutely not true. Mr. Speaker, what in fact is happening is we are seeing ER times go down, wait times go down. We're seeing ambulance response times go down as well. Mr. Speaker, we actually have AHS who hired, just in the last week alone, they put out over 700 job offers, Mr. Speaker. We have over 3,500 more nurses that have been registered by the College of Nurses. More than 330 more doctors registered by the College of Physicians.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Varsity.
The UCP has shown that they can't be trusted with our healthcare system. But today, they have a chance to show that they've learned their lesson and will be willing to support public healthcare, support frontline workers, and end the chaos they've introduced in the health system. Albertans will be watching, Mr. Speaker. Can the health minister confirm if today will mark an end of the UCP healthcare chaos and support public healthcare, or should we expect more of the same UCP chaos?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, what I can say is Albertans should watch the budget because we have historically, under our government, had the highest increases to health care. Mr. Speaker, today will be no less. I am looking forward to the budget coming out. Mr. Speaker, I will be happy to share with all Albertans the progress that we're making on health care because, Mr. Speaker, everyone in Alberta deserves excellent excellent health care, and that's what we're focused on, Mr. Speaker. Excellent health care and empowering our workforce. That's what we're about, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The honourable member for Calgary-Acadia has a question.
Affordable, accessible and safe childcare is critical for families. But under the UCP, far too many Albertans are falling through the cracks. This government utterly failed earlier this year, to the point where the Premier had to effectively fire one of her ministers and reassign responsibility to another. My question is simple. Will the Minister of Family and Children's Services apologize to childcare operators and to families for the chaos and the uncertainty this government's failures have caused?
The Premier has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to say that our Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade and our Minister of Technology and Innovation have worked together to create a new payment model for childcare workers. And as of tomorrow, they will be getting 80% of the payment that they are owed at the beginning of the month, with 20% as a trailing payment at the end of the month. This is the feedback that we got from daycare operators to be able to assist them in managing their expenses, and we're looking forward to being able to hear the feedback that we get from them.
Good leadership. Member for Calgary-Acadia.
The UCP failed to properly fund the childcare system, and the result was disastrous. We saw rolling closures of daycares and a completely broken payment system that badly impacted childcare operators because this government failed to step up. Real investments and proper funding is essential if we want Alberta to get to the goal of $10 a day childcare, which would make a huge impact on the lives of Albertan families. So can the minister confirm that today's budget will provide all the funding and support operators and families need?
The Honourable Order. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to tell you, I've been looking at the news stories across the country, and they're having similar problems in every single province in British Columbia, where there's an NDP government. They're having a problem in Ontario as well. And part of the problem...
Order. The Honourable the Premier.
And part of the problem is that the federal government has dictated what the year-over-year increase can be in the amount that they are allowed to charge. And because of the inflation crisis created by the Liberal NDP coalition in Ottawa, they're not able to keep up with their expenses.
Order. The Honourable the Member.
I know that the Premier is not a fan of this program. She once even called it a socialist daycare scheme. I hope that doesn't explain the reluctance of this government to make real investments needed to get to $10 a day childcare. The UCP have broken so many promises to Albertans that I hope this isn't one. Can the minister assure this House and all Albertans watching today that this budget will ensure all Albertans get access to a $10 a day childcare?
Yes, Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have created 22,000 additional spaces, and we are well ahead of other jurisdictions. They may want to look next door in British Columbia, where their NDP cousins have found that there are tens of thousands of people on a waiting list for care. So I feel very confident about where we find ourselves on the pathway to $10 a day daycare. It is the agreement that we signed with the federal government, and we're working diligently towards achieving that. We have $15 a day daycare at the start of the year, and it's helping parents and families.
Member for Edmonton Meadows.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta's capital city is booming, and since the last hospital was built in 1988, we have added 1 million more people to the region. It is the south side of our city that is seeing the fastest rate of growth, and a new hospital is urgently needed. The NDP acted on that back in 2017 by starting work on a new South Edmonton hospital. To the Minister, given that your government promised to follow through with the NDP plan to construct the hospital and given earmarked funds last year, why the promise broken?
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure has risen.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP announced the Edmonton Hospital back in 2017, and they did nothing with it. They announced it without a feasibility study or a business case, which are critical to design and budget. Another thing that they did not have. Frankly, they did zip and pip because it was announced purely as a political move. Surprise, surprise. Mr. Speaker, the NDP were opportunistic in announcing projects in an attempt to gain public support ahead of an election, knowing full well that they could not deliver. Mr. Speaker, we are taking action to build a healthcare infrastructure strategy that works.
The honourable member for Edmonton Meadows.
Your UCP party ran a campaign on this promise. Mr. Speaker, any good government should identify the needs of its citizens and address them. And given that the land is sitting idle and the people are struggling to access health care, and given yesterday the minister boasted about how beneficial the new stollery was going to be, why is this government breaking its promise made by the Premier to the people of Edmonton to build the Southside Edmonton Hospital?
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our province has more than 40 health projects underway in our province, with over 75 schools in development or construction. Our commitment to building infrastructure here in Alberta is evident. Mr. Speaker, what I am curious about are the positions taken by the NDP candidates running in their leadership race, because I am absolutely confused. Are they trying to back up on their previous record? Are they trying to back out of their current policies? It seems the opposition is realizing the merits of conservative policies and are attempting to disguise themselves.
The order, the honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, another trait of a good government is how trustworthy it is. And given our growing city needs health care, given this government doesn't bat an eye cancelling this and pausing that, I will ask a simple question again. Will today's budget reverse your bad decision and recommit to building at South Edmonton Hospital?
The Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have an NDP party that is trying to distance themselves from the mothership. We have candidates that are calling for the elimination of the federal carbon tax, which I'm so surprised. And
the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is really hard to comprehend, considering they invented the retail carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, Alberta's NDP introduced the first retail carbon tax to all of North America. And now, in an affordability crunch, they're trying to say that it hurts Albertans. At least they've recognized the errors in their ways.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When you Google Canada, one of the very first pictures that comes up is of Lake Louise, one of Alberta's many breathtaking viewscapes. Alberta attracts visitors from across the world to view our province's many natural wonders, most commonly found in the foothills and Rocky Mountains. To the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, what is this government doing to make sure that our province's protected areas and pristine viewscapes are not disturbed by wind turbines the size of the Calgary Tower?
The order, the Honourable Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member for that terrific question. Our iconic viewscapes are synonymous with Alberta, and to make sure that they can be enjoyed for generations to come, our government is establishing a 35-kilometre buffer zone around these areas, where new wind projects will no longer be permitted due to their vertical footprint, and other proposed developments may be subject to visual impacts. That's what a responsible government does to make sure that we can develop well and enjoy our viewscapes forever.
Order, the Honourable Member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that agriculture is one of Alberta's largest economic drivers, allowing our rural communities to thrive, and given that Alberta's farmers and ranchers are putting high-quality, affordable food on tables around the world, to the same minister, please tell this House how these new rules will work to ensure Alberta's world-class agricultural lands are protected from renewable developments that would otherwise sterilize them.
The order, the Honourable Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Agriculture is at the very heart of our province. Yesterday, our government announced changes that will protect our native grasslands, irrigated land, and productive agricultural lands from reckless developments. Our farmers and ranchers will put affordable, high-quality food on tables around the world, and we're making sure that they can keep doing this for years to come, while our government continues to ensure our electricity grid is reliable and affordable.
The Honourable Member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for that answer. Mr. Speaker, Given that these renewable developments are almost exclusively built in rural areas, and given the potential side effects are disproportionately felt by our rural residents, and given that our rural municipalities are best positioned to advocate for their residents and local community, I ask the same minister to please tell this House how these new rules will include municipal governments in the approval process for renewable generation projects in Alberta.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The RMA and its members have been advocating to be included in this process for decades. It's why our government has listened to them, and that's why they will now automatically be granted the right to participate in the AUC's approval process. We also made sure that municipalities won't face financial barriers by making them eligible to request cost recovery. I am proud of the numerous municipalities around the province that have voiced their support for yesterday's announcement, including Vulcan County, Mountain View County, Cypress County, and the County of 40 Mile, as well as many, many more.
Honourable member for Sherwood Park is next.
Rural municipalities are facing $43 million in unpaid property taxes owed by energy companies for 2023. Energy companies have now accrued over $250 million in unpaid municipal taxes. Liens and license limitations are not getting the job done, and all the while the UCP are dramatically cutting local government funding to municipalities. All operators should be expected to pay their taxes and be accountable to pay what they owe to municipalities. What is the minister doing to get our municipal partners the property taxes they are owed?
Good question. The Honourable the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the honourable member probably knows, a couple years ago we added a new piece of legislation to give them the authority to collect in court. I worked with my colleague, the Minister of Energy, and we had them, the AER put in Directive 67, which limits the company's ability to transfer wells if they're behind in their taxes. Everybody has to pay their taxes, Mr. Speaker. We worked hard with municipalities to make it better, but our work is not done yet. Those that don't want to pay keep finding new ways, and we will keep finding new ways to put a stop to this bad behavior.
Order. The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park.
Good news, Minister. Given that UCP won't help municipalities to develop tax revenue from new energy projects because they don't like the way wind turbines and solar panels look. Different strokes for different folks, am I right? And given that rural municipalities are owed over $250 million, and given that tax revenue that municipalities could earn from planned solar and wind projects is over $250 million per year, if the minister won't help these municipalities get the money they're owed, and won't reverse the cuts, will he at least support those who want renewable projects in their ridings?
Yes. The Honourable the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member's wrong on all counts. We have already helped the municipalities go to court. We have already helped municipalities by making sure they can't transfer wells if companies are behind on their on what they owe them. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work with them, and they're wrong. We've got record development, record applications to build renewables here. The folks got to keep up. I just recommend the folks on the other side take a subscription to Google because they don't know what's going on.
Order, the Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, I love your pro-renewables approach, given that this government is determined to methodically download their responsibilities to municipal governments, and given that they are using their power as the provincial government to financially constrain their municipal partners. Is it the minister's plan for rural municipalities to have them run out of money and dissolve, or will he commit that this $250 million tax bill will be paid by the end of this year?
The Honourable the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've been working very hard to keep municipalities viable. The honourable member should know that we just put in place the local government fiscal framework, something municipalities have been asking forever, where their revenue goes up with provincial revenues and down with provincial revenues, and in fact have changed that to make sure that the percentage is 100% of the difference. Mr. Speaker, we're working very hard, very close, and the honourable member should stay tuned for today's budget. He might find something in there that is good for municipalities.
Order. The Honourable Member for Calgary Edgemont has a question.
This government has blocked universal access to prescription contraception 3 times in the span of a year. For a person paying for birth control, this is $600 that they could have saved this year if the UCP had just stepped up and done the wrong thing. I know that Albertans overwhelmingly support pharmacare. It is essential health care, and it's long overdue. This government wants to disadvantage women. Is it not the government's responsibility to support all Albertans?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we want to make sure that Alberta gets its fair share and that we get a good deal. Mr. Speaker, we're not alone in that. In fact, Alberta's Pharmacists Association today, in the response to the National Pharmacare Plan announcement, said, and I quote, "The Alberta Pharmacists Association believes that pharmacare funding should be transferred directly to the province to ensure alignment with existing programs, improve access, and provide coverage to those Albertans in need. There's little to no direct engagement with pharmacists who play a primary role in administering and coordinating drug plans."
The Honourable Member for Calgary Edgemont.
Given British Columbia already has universal access to contraception, and Manitoba announced that they intend to do this too, and given that almost 180,000 people have received free prescription contraception since BC offered it in April, where is the advantage to young people that be able to get free birth control everywhere else in this country except for Alberta?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I think the member opposite doesn't know that our plans already cover 50 oral contraceptives, intrauterine devices, and emergency contraceptives covered in our...
The Honourable the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite should become informed about what our plans actually do cover. In our pharmacare plan here in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, we provide over 5,000 drugs, including diabetes medication, including birth control and contraceptives. Mr. Speaker, we have a great plan. If the feds want to opt in, they can give us more money to it.
The order, the Honourable Member.
Given that the UCP seems to think that birth control is a luxury item, while we are experiencing a cost of living crisis, and given that the rest of the country has said loud and clear prescription contraception should be free, and given that Albertans who use birth control are currently paying more than $10,000 over their lifetime out of their pockets for contraceptive products, why is the minister refusing life-changing measures like a contraceptive pharmacare plan that would take an immense financial burden off the shoulders of Albertan women?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, again, the member opposites are trying to make, lemonade out of lemons here. This is a bad plan in the sense that the federal government is not acknowledging our current plans. We already have a pharmacare program, Mr. Speaker.
Order, 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 order. I had no problem hearing the question, but I am having a hard time hearing the answer. The minister is entitled to give it. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, even the Canadian Chambers of Commerce has issued a statement saying that a single-payer pharmacare program would actually leave many Canadians worse off. A majority of Canadians are already covered by employer-sponsored drug insurance plans that give them faster access to more medicines than what a single-payer system would provide. Plus, Mr. Speaker, public systems typically offer less access to new drugs.
The Honourable Member for Lacombe-Panoka has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, Gull Lake is an important resource throughout the communities of Lacombe-Panoka and the entire province. However, invasive species are threatening this delicate ecosystem. Native to Eastern Europe, zebra and quagga mussels can cost millions of dollars in damages and are virtually impossible to eradicate once introduced to a water body. Given the zebra mussel is provincially recognized as a freshwater-dwelling invasive species, to the Minister of the Environment, what is the current status of aquatic invasive species like the quagga and zebra mussels in our provincial waterways right now?
The Honourable the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for the important question. The member is correct. Our province and others face a real risk from aquatic invasive species. They can, Mr. Speaker, be easily introduced by boats and other watercrafts moving from province to province. Once inside our borders, Mr. Speaker, species like the quagga and zebra mussels can cause massive damage not only to our waterways but also to irrigation infrastructure. Estimates suggest that invasive mussels and other aquatic species could cost us $75 million annually in maintenance costs if widely established. We have to protect these dangerous aquatic invasive species from getting a foothold in our province, and I'm proud to say that our lakes
The Honourable Member for Lacombe-Panoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister. Given the main method of introduction for mussels is through watercraft transportation, given under current legislation, the Minister can appoint a series of individuals to conduct inspections and ensure proper checks are conducted on boats in transport. And given boating season is right around the corner, to the Minister of the Environment, do we currently have appointed watercraft inspectors in Alberta, and what are the steps being taken to prepare for this upcoming boating season?
The Honourable the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We do have an early detection rapid response plan in place should mussels or any other invasive species or plant be found in any Alberta water body. However, protection remains our absolute best defence. Last year, our province, Mr. Speaker, inspected nearly 9,000 boats, 19 of which had invasive mussels attached. By inspecting these watercrafts, we stopped these mussels from entering our waters. Our watercraft inspection and decontamination programs are already preparing for the upcoming season, and this year we will be doing more than ever. We're looking to expand the number of permanent watercraft inspection stations and add a new roving inspection crew as well.
The Honourable Member.
Thank you. Given mussels have already managed to make their way into most Canadian water systems, and given the government is responsible for about $1 billion in water management infrastructure, including 535 kilometres of main irrigation canals, 1.5 billion cubic metres of storage in more than 120 dams, lake control structures and pump houses, to the Minister of the Environment, do you have an ongoing plan to ensure our waterways and infrastructure remain protected as the threat of these invasive species continues to increase?
The Minister.
Mr. Speaker, and again, I want to thank the member for the question. We do have one of the most effective inspection and prevention programs in Canada, but I've asked my department to go even further. I'm proud to say that later this year, Environment and Protected Areas will be engaging key stakeholders on launching a new provincial task force. This task force will take our invasive species response to the next level, educate stakeholders on this issue, the watercraft inspections program, and explore new ways to expand our work in the future. This is an important step forward, Mr. Speaker, and I'll have more to say on this task force in the coming months.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Glenmore has a question.
Mr. Speaker, we now know who's pulling the strings when it comes to the Premier's investment-killing renewables policy. The Premier met behind closed doors with an anti-renewables group that calls climate change an outright lie and called wind development a scam. This group lectured her about why renewable energy should not be developed. We know the Premier heeded their demands, just like she did with the demands of David Parker. To the Premier, who else are you meeting with behind closed doors and letting decide your government's policies for you?
The Honourable the Minister of Affordability and Utilities has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud to say that the pause on renewables is over. We have come to a responsible development path forward that puts an agriculture-first lens on all of our lands, making sure that farmers and ranchers have access to land for generations to come, as well as making it possible to have a thriving renewables industry, not to mention the increased growth of natural gas, hydrogen, biomass, geothermal, and a tremendous North American leading energy system, and I'm very proud to be part of a government that did that work.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Glenmore.
Given that the energy industry is calling the Premier's new rules a second soft moratorium, and given that the annual municipal revenue from renewables is projected at $277 million in the next few years, and given that revenue in counties like Willow Creek in Livingston-McLeod, Cypress County in Cypress-Medicine Hat, and Vulcan in Cardston-Sixica will be lost, will the Premier explain why is she listening to the French minority and foregoing revenue that will strengthen Alberta's rural economy?
The Honourable the Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's ironic that nearly every single one of those counties mentioned supported our decision. And it's important to note that the AUC's application list has doubled over the course of the pause, because that's what responsible government does. It increases the attraction for investment, it increases certainty, and that's why we're going to continue to lead not only Canada, but North America in our energy development.
Order, the Honourable Member.
Given that the government is now telling Alberta's landowners they cannot legally say no to oil and gas development on their private lands, but also cannot say yes to renewables development on their private lands, and given that this government is supporting
supposedly dealing with renewables liabilities but cannot even estimate oil and gas liabilities hovering around $88 billion, will the Energy Minister stop taking direction from anti-climate groups and address oil and gas liabilities and protect taxpayers from this looming crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Again, we are very proud of what we're doing in this sector. We're making sure that we can have agriculture first, as well as renewable energy development, as well as making sure that our entire sector continues to grow, and Alberta will continue to lead not only Canada, but North America in responsible development. We are also adding the requirement that these developers put in a security so that if those sites ever reach their end of life, we will have money ready and waiting to do that reclamation, and no municipality or private landowner will be left holding the bag.
The member for Calgary East has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alberta's population is booming. Canadians from coast to coast are flocking to our province to take part in Alberta Advantage and the boundless opportunities Alberta has to offer. As a result, demand for housing in my constituency of Calgary East and across Calgary is rising rapidly. Can the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services please share what programs our government has developed to ensure a sufficient supply of housing in Calgary and all of Alberta?
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Housing, Community and Social Services.
Our government's working on our Stronger Foundations plan, Mr. Speaker. It will create 82,000 more affordable houses in households, I should say, in our province, Mr. Speaker, between now and 2031. We're also investing $250 million.
The Honourable the Minister.
We're investing $250 million in things like rent supplements, Mr. Speaker, $9 billion overall with our partners in our affordable housing program. Mr. Speaker, a sharp contrast from the NDP, whose plan is to force homeless people to live in tents, to make more people homeless, who made the affordable housing stock go down under their watch, Mr. Speaker.
The order, the only one with the call is the member for Calgary East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Given that affordable housing provides safe, stable homes for families in need, allowing them to use more of their income on their other essential needs. And given that a growing number of my constituents have voiced concerns about affordability and access to housing, can the same minister explain the Alberta's government plans to create more affordable housing in our province?
The Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, we're also focused on reducing red tape, working with our municipalities to bring in more houses, Mr. Speaker, and I'm excited to report that Alberta has the most houses being built in their history, Mr. Speaker. Even last January, Mr. Speaker, the City of Calgary, for example, had the highest houses built in a January since statistics were kept in our province, Mr. Speaker. While everywhere else in the country, house supply is going down, Mr. Speaker, and the biggest thing we're going to do is fight against the NDP's plan to bring in rent control, Mr. Speaker, which will make more people homeless, Mr. Speaker, and will make sure that our housing stock will continue to go down.
Order, the Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Given that the rising cost of living, higher interest rates, and increasing cost of housing are deepening the calls for action to make housing more affordable and accessible in our province, can the same minister please explain what measures the government is taking to improve the outlook of housing affordability in our province and ensure Alberta continues to be the best place in the world to call home?
The Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the NDP's watch, we saw affordable housing stocks go down by 50%, Mr. Speaker, which is probably why their affordable housing plan, Mr. Speaker, is to make homeless people live in tents, Mr. Speaker. But this government has built almost 5,000 new affordable housing units since 2019, Mr. Speaker. It is on track to build another 82,000 affordable housing units, Mr. Speaker, while all the time having the best growing housing industry anywhere in the country, Mr. Speaker. Alberta is getting the job done, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to continue to bet on our great province.
Order. A point of order is noted at 2:31. The Honourable Member for Calgary Klein is next.
I've heard from many in Calgary Klein who are worried about the Premier's close relationship with groups like Take Back Alberta, how she tried to help extremists like Artur Pawlowski with his legal problems, and how she happily sat down with alt-right characters like Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, who only weeks before that he was welcomed to Alberta, described trans individuals as demented. Wow. Will the Premier join me in condemning these statements?
Condemn them.
The Honourable, the Government House Leader has risen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today and answer this question from the member opposite. I'm not sure where the member is getting her speaking notes from. Conversations about Tucker Carlson are a little bit stale, if you're asking me personally. This time is to talk about government business, and for the members opposite to use this time to ask about Tucker Carlson. And the Premier has also made it very clear that the goal is to share Alberta's message with as many people as possible, whether they're in Alberta, Canada, or around the world, whether or not we agree with them, Mr. Speaker. And that is exactly why the Premier met with Tucker Carlson.
Order. The honourable member for Calgary-Klein.
The Alberta story includes trans people. So given that this Premier proudly partied with Tucker, and given that it was only shortly after she hung out with him that she rolled out her policies, which have now been denounced by doctors, teachers, parents, the 2S LGBTQIA community, and given that the Premier claims that she consulted and that she knows best rather than listen to these experts, given that the timing is very suspicious, can the Premier confirm that her dinner with Tucker was the only real consultation?
Good question.
The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, again, I do find it disappointing that the members opposite would use this time in question period to ask questions about government policy, to be asking about something as stale as a Tucker Carlson interview. This was a conversation that we talked about before we broke for the Christmas break. But what I will say is Alberta has a tremendous story to tell, a tremendous story to share. The Premier's job is to sell that story and tell that story to everybody, including here in Canada, in the U.S. and around the world. And that's exactly why she met with Tucker Carlson, an opportunity to tell Alberta's story to a lot of people who listen.
Member for Calgary-Klein.
Given that Albertans are struggling with a healthcare crisis, affordability crisis, and so much more, and that this Premier is choosing to spend her time to divide Albertans and spread misinformation, and given that her position has been loudly cheered on by Take Back Alberta, who's now taking credit for the policy, and given that the Premier has a leadership review this fall, can she admit that she is securing the leadership needs by putting trans kids and their families in harm's way?
Yep. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this is not a time to be talking about party politics, rather about government business. I do find the insinuation outright repulsive. Yep. I find that repulsive that the member opposite would insinuate such matters. I will say the government believes that all children in Alberta deserve our respect and our support as they grow and as they mature. And we are engaging on the implementation of health policies around gender reassignment and affirmation that will align with international evidence-based best practices.
The Honourable Order. The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Beverly, Clairview.
Mr. Speaker, like so many Albertans, I was shocked when the Health Minister announced that she would be rejecting the federal government's plan to provide pharmacare to all of us here in Alberta. Here is a national plan, a plan that has the potential to improve the lives of thousands of Alberta families, including folks in Beverly Clairview. In fact, we've already heard this proposal being described by my constituents as a ray of light, and a real hope. Why is the Minister rejecting the proposed program without considering its content and the impact it could have on Albertans?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
It's not actually universal pharmacare. They're only talking about two drug categories, only in contraceptives and only in diabetes. Mr. Speaker, we have a robust pharmacare program here in Alberta, over 5,000 drugs, Mr. Speaker, including contraceptives, including diabetes. If the federal government, and this is the very conversation I had with Minister Mark Miller just the other day, if they want to provide us the funding, we will gladly enhance those programs in our province.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Beverly, Clairview.
Given that a constituent recently shared her story with me, where she noted that her private insurance costs her family $375 a month in order to access $500 worth of medication for a chronic condition, given that subsidized premiums work out to a measly 30% reduction in rates and do nothing to help with copays, when will this government accept the fact that enhancing insurance doesn't cut it, and that Alberta families need meaningful help, especially during this affordability crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, government did table legislation today on a pharmacare framework. And our initial review shows that the bill outlines that the Federal Minister of Health may make payments to a province or territory in order to increase existing public pharmacare. We are hopeful this means that the federal government heard Alberta, that they want to help us in our current pharmacare program. Mr. Speaker, we will always fight for Albertans, and Mr. Speaker, what they are proposing has no timelines. It's going to take a long time to get through.
Honourable Member for Edmonton Beverly Clareview.
No timelines, just like the South Edmonton Hospital, Minister. Given that I was an elementary school assistant principal, I know a schoolyard spat when I see one. Given that this government's obsession with the Prime Minister and the federal government is causing real harm to Albertans caught in the middle, and given that pharmacare is not an attack on Alberta, when will the UCP government start listening and focusing on the needs of real Albertans and get behind pharmacare so families can get the support they so desperately need?
Yes. Well, the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite have not taken the time to look at what actually is going on. Mr. Speaker, we have a very good relationship with the federal government. Minister Holland and myself actually do text quite often and do speak quite often. And we were able, just before Christmas, to sign the shared agreements, the shared priorities agreement. Mr. Speaker, that was worth over $1 billion to Albertans. You know why, Mr. Speaker? Because we collaborated. We did that ahead of time. This is not happening with this, and they are not collaborating with us, Mr. Speaker, as they should.
Order. Order. The Honourable Member for Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville has the next question.
Mr. Speaker, under our government, Alberta has become a place of opportunity and momentum. Many newcomers have moved here, growing our economy and our communities. This is not a process without its growing pains, as many essential sectors, including healthcare, are seeing labour shortages. The solution to this could be the new Albertans themselves, as many newcomers have the skills to work but lack the credential recognition to work where they are needed. Could the Minister of Advanced Education summarize the work of our government has done to help new Albertans match their credentials?
Advanced Education.
Thank you to the honourable member for that question. Mr. Speaker, we understand that beginning a career is a top priority for new Albertans looking to start their lives in our province. And certainly that was the experience of my parents when they immigrated to this country many, many years ago. That's why we're getting newcomers to work more quickly, reducing barriers to credential recognition and expediting registration of professionals. These are individuals who can help fill critical gaps in our workforce right away. Through our Fairness for Newcomers office, we are working with regulators to help ensure internationally trained newcomers seeking to work will get their credentials expedited.
Saskatchewan-Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that credential matching can be a highly technical, very industry-specific process with different regulations based on the industry, and given that our high standards are essential to maintaining the confidence of Albertans, could the Minister of Advanced Education offer an overview of the engagement the government has undertaken with different professionals and regulatory bodies to ensure the standards are maintained while streamlining the credential matching processes?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
That's an excellent question, Mr. Speaker. The Fairness for Newcomers Office continues to collect data from more than 70 Alberta regulators on their credential recognition timelines and processes. This data informs work with regulators on reducing barriers and improving efficiency in the system. Compliance reviews were conducted with select regulatory bodies. The Fairness for Newcomers Office is working closely to monitor and ensure recommendations from these reviews are implemented. Additional regulatory bodies are being selected for the next phase of compliance reviews.
The Honourable Member for Saskatchewan-Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister for her response. Given that obstacles to getting their credentials recognized could dissuade newcomers from moving to Alberta, and further, given that it has been a priority of this government to attract skilled and talented individuals to this province, hang on, it's coming. Could the same minister please inform the House how the work of the government is working to help attract more qualified individuals to support industries experiencing labour shortages?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, there is a tremendous amount of work being done in government to attract newcomers. First, in addition to the Fairness for Newcomers Office, our government also offers the International Qualifications Assessment Service, which completes assessments and issues certificates comparing credentials to Canadian educational standards. Second, the Alberta.ca Foreign Qualification Recognition page lists a number of resources to support newcomers, including Opportunity Alberta, a Before You Arrive in Canada video to help newcomers prepare for their life in Canada, and so much more information. I would encourage Albertans to check it out. Good job.
Honourable members, that concludes the time allotted for oral question period. In light of the budget address, we will continue immediately to the remainder of member statements and the rest of the daily routine. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
Today is Budget Day in Alberta. We already have heard from the Premier regarding what she plans for us. And the news is bad, especially for seniors. At a time of record inflation and population growth, the Premier is cutting spending and reneging on a promised tax cut for those in the lowest tax bracket. Sadly, we've come to expect bad decisions from this government, and certainly decisions not based on the facts. Extreme right-wing ideology rules the day here in Alberta. Another example of extreme right-wing thinking is the government's decision to break their promised investments in making life more affordable for seniors. Seniors were supposed to see $12 million in lower fees last year. Promise made, promise broken. We will see shortly if the Premier will honour the proposed $18.5 million in reduced fees she has promised seniors this year. But given all the broken promises we've seen so far, I'm not hopeful. Governments have choices. The UCP has made several choices that have hurt seniors. They kicked the seniors off their drug plan. They cut the seniors' benefit. They cut funding for seniors' drivers' medical exams. They terminated the seniors' advocate and closed the office, meaning advocacy and support for seniors is gone. Besides these specific attacks on seniors, all Albertans have been negatively impacted by the affordability crisis. Under the UCP, utility rates have skyrocketed, car insurance has escalated, and groceries are through the roof. Alberta has a housing crisis that impacts those on limited incomes the most. Continuing care accommodation fees have increased, and the UCP wants to gamble away the CPP. Despite the Premier's troublesome foreshadowing, the UCP can still do the right thing and properly fund public programs for inflation and population growth. Let's hope the UCP cares enough to not leave seniors behind in this budget.
Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Presenting petitions. Notices of motions.
Honourable members, for the benefit of all members, for your information's sake, we will have a short recess prior to the budget address and after the daily routine. The government House Leader is rising for a notice of motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to give oral notice of Bill 10, the Financial Statutes Amendment Act 2024, sponsored by the President of the Treasury Board, and the Minister of Finance.
Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
The government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 59013, I rise to table the appropriate number of copies of the 2024-2025 main estimate schedule.
Are there other tablings? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Glenora has risen.
Mr. Speaker, I have the requisite number of copies of research based here in Alberta, hot off the press, demonstrating that 86% of Alberta teachers say that classroom complexity is much higher than it used to be, and 62% report higher class sizes this year under the UCP government.
Are there other tablings? Seeing none.
Clerk, deferred divisions.
Honourable members, that brings us to points of order, and at 2:31 a point of order was called and is subsequently being withdrawn. Honourable members, that brings us to orders of the day, orders du jour, and in order to allow adequate time to prepare for the budget address by the Honourable the President of Treasury Board and the Minister of Finance this afternoon, the House will stand recessed until 3:15. Please return to the chamber by 10 minutes after 3. The House stands recessed.